The wind howled across the Wyoming plains, carrying the sharp sting of winter's first bite, as Caleb Morrow stood frozen at the edge of his crumbling ranch, staring at the bloodied leather glove clutched in his trembling hands. It wasn't his glove, it belonged to his son, Jacob, who had vanished into the wild heart of the frontier 3 years ago, leaving behind nothing but a trail of whispers and a father's broken heart. The glove, caked in dirt and stained with something darker, had been found tangled in the barbed wire near the old oak tree, the same tree where Caleb had taught Jacob to carve his name as a boy. Now, that tree stood as a silent witness to a mystery that refused to let Caleb go. The words scrawled on a tattered note pinned to the glove burned in his mind. "Don't take it off, just do it." He didn't know what it meant, but the weight of those words felt like a command from the grave, pulling him toward a truth he wasn't sure he could face. The ranch, once a thriving testament to his family's legacy, was now a shadow of itself, barren fields, splintered fences, and a house that creaked with the ghosts of better days. Caleb's weathered hands shook as he undid the note, ignoring the cryptic warning, and in that moment, he made a choice that would unravel everything he thought he knew about his son, his land, and himself. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the unbreakable bonds of family, please hit that like button, drop a comment, share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Gentle Hearts for more stories that touch the soul. Your support keeps these tales alive. Caleb Morrow was no stranger to hardship. Born into a lineage of ranchers who had tamed the unforgiving Wyoming wilderness, he had inherited not just the land but the stubborn resolve to hold it together. His hands bore the scars of decades spent wrestling barbed wire, breaking horses, and hauling hay under a sun that offered no mercy. But nothing had prepared him for the day Jacob left. At 19, Jacob had been a restless spirit, his blue eyes always fixed on the horizon, chasing dreams too big for the ranch to hold. He'd argued with Caleb that last night, his voice sharp with youthful defiance, demanding a life beyond the endless cycle of toil. Caleb, too proud and too rooted in tradition, had let his temper flare, telling Jacob to go if he couldn't respect the land that had raised him. Those words had been a blade, cutting deeper than either had realized. By morning, Jacob was gone, leaving only a half-empty room and a father who would spend the next 3 years drowning in regret. The ranch had begun to decay in Jacob's absence, as if the land itself mourned the boy who had once run barefoot through its fields. Caleb worked harder, pushed himself to the brink, but the cattle dwindled, the bank's letters grew sharper, and the loneliness settled into his bones like frost. The discovery of the glove changed everything. It wasn't just a relic, it was a summons, pulling Caleb into a mystery that felt both sacred and terrifying. The note's words haunted him as he stood beneath the gnarled branches of the oak tree, its bark still etched with Jacob's initials. "Don't take it off, just do it." The phrase was cryptic, almost nonsensical, but it carried an urgency that gnawed at Caleb's soul. He tucked the glove into his coat pocket, its weight heavier than it should have been, and began to search for answers. The ranch was vast, stretching across miles of rugged terrain, dotted with hidden gullies and forgotten trails. Caleb started there, combing through the places Jacob had loved as a boy, the creek where they'd fished, the barn where he'd hidden with his sketchbooks, the ridge where he'd watched the stars. Each step stirred memories that cut like shards of glass, Jacob's laughter, his stubborn streak, the way he'd looked at Caleb with a mix of admiration and frustration. But the land offered no clues, only silence. Desperate, Caleb turned to the townsfolk of Bitter Creek, a small, weathered community that clung to the edge of the frontier like a stubborn weed. The people there knew Caleb as a man of few words, a rancher who kept to himself since his wife, Eliza, had passed a decade earlier. They offered sympathy but little else. No one had seen Jacob, no one knew where he'd gone. Yet, whispers circulated about strangers passing through, men with hard eyes and wagons that moved under cover of night. Caleb's gut told him the glove was tied to something bigger, something dangerous, and he couldn't shake the feeling that Jacob was still out there, waiting for him to act. Days turned into weeks, and Caleb's search became an obsession. He neglected the ranch, letting fences sag and cattle wander, as he chased every lead, no matter how faint. He tracked down old trails, questioned drifters at the saloon, and even rode out to the abandoned mining camps that dotted the hills, their skeletal frames looming like ghosts of the gold rush. The glove never left his side, a talisman and a torment. He'd hold it at night, tracing its worn edges, imagining Jacob's hand inside it, wondering what had happened to his boy. The note's warning echoed in his mind, but he couldn't stop himself from unraveling its meaning. One evening, as a storm rolled in, Caleb found himself at the edge of the Blackthorn Gorge, a jagged scar in the earth where the wind seemed to whisper secrets. There, half buried in the dirt, he found a rusted spur, its design unmistakably Jacob's, a gift Caleb had given him for his 16th birthday. The discovery hit him like a blow, and for the first time in years, Caleb wept, his sobs swallowed by the howling wind. He realized then that Jacob hadn't just left, he'd been pulled into something dark, something that had left behind only fragments for Caleb to piece together. The turning point came when Caleb met Lila, a young woman who ran a small trading post on the outskirts of Bitter Creek. Lila was an outsider, her sharp wit and kind eyes masking a past she rarely spoke of. She'd heard the rumors about Jacob, and when Caleb showed her the glove, her face paled. She hesitated, then told him about a group of men who'd passed through months earlier, men who spoke in low tones about a job in the mountains, men who carried the same kind of spurs Jacob had owned. Lila's words were cautious, but her eyes held a fire that told Caleb she knew more than she let on. Reluctantly, she shared a story of her own, a brother lost to the same kind of men who dealt in secrets and left broken families in their wake. Lila offered to help, and though Caleb was wary of trusting anyone, her quiet strength reminded him of Eliza, and he couldn't say no. Together, they followed the trail, piecing together fragments of Jacob's path. They found signs of a camp in the mountains, abandoned but recent, with traces of a struggle, broken bottles, a torn shirt, and another note, this one scrawled in Jacob's handwriting, "I'm sorry, Pa. I had to." The words shattered Caleb, but they also fueled him. Jacob was alive, or had been, and Caleb would find him, no matter the cost. The trail led them deeper into the wilderness, where the air grew thin and the shadows longer. Caleb and Lila faced dangers that tested their resolve, blizzards that blinded them, wolves that stalked their camp, and men who watched from a distance, their intentions unclear. Caleb's body ached, his heart heavier with each step, but Lila's presence kept him grounded. She shared stories of her own losses, her voice steady even as her eyes glistened, and Caleb found himself opening up in ways he hadn't since Eliza's death. He told her about the night Jacob left, the regret that had eaten at him, the fear that he'd failed his son. Lila listened, her hand resting gently on his arm, and for the first time, Caleb felt a flicker of hope, not just for Jacob, but for himself. The ranch, the glove, the note, they were all pieces of a puzzle, but Lila was the one who helped him see that the picture wasn't complete without forgiveness, for Jacob and for himself. As they pushed deeper into the mountains, the truth began to emerge, jagged and raw. Jacob had fallen in with a group of outlaws, men who promised freedom but delivered only chains. The glove, the notes, they were his way of reaching out, a cry for help disguised as a warning. The climax came in a hidden valley, where Caleb and Lila found the outlaws' camp. It was a place of shadows, where men with hollow eyes guarded a stash of stolen goods, gold, weapons, and secrets that could ruin lives. Jacob was there, thinner, harder, but alive, his eyes carrying a weight Caleb didn't recognize. The reunion was not the joyful moment Caleb had dreamed of, it was fraught with pain, anger, and truths neither was ready to face. Jacob had undone the life Caleb had built for him, chasing a freedom that had trapped him instead. The cryptic note made sense now, it was Jacob's plea to stay away, to protect Caleb from the danger he'd stumbled into. But Caleb had undone it, had acted, and now they stood face to face, father and son, with everything at stake. The confrontation that followed was brutal, not just with the outlaws, who fought to protect their secrets, but between Caleb and Jacob, as they laid bare years of hurt and misunderstanding. Lila's courage and quick thinking saved them when the fight turned deadly, but it was Caleb's refusal to give up on his son that changed everything. He didn't just fight for Jacob's life, he fought for his soul, reminding him of the boy who'd carved his name in the oak tree, the boy who still had a home to come back to. When the dust settled, the outlaws were gone, scattered or captured, and the valley was quiet again. Jacob was alive, but the road ahead was uncertain. He couldn't return to the ranch, not yet, there were debts to pay, not just to the law but to himself. Caleb understood, though it broke his heart to let his son go again. But this time, it was different. Jacob left with a promise, a fragile thread of hope that they could rebuild what had been broken. Caleb returned to the ranch with Lila, who chose to stay, her own wounds finding solace in the land that had shaped Caleb's life. The ranch began to heal, slowly, as Caleb poured his heart into it, not just for himself but for the family he still believed in. The glove remained on his mantle, a reminder of the journey, of the love that had driven him to undo the warning and act. The note's words no longer haunted him, they were a testament to the bond that had survived the wilderness, the pain, and the years of silence. As the sun set over the Wyoming plains, casting a golden glow across the fields, Caleb stood by the oak tree, his fingers tracing Jacob's initials. The ranch was alive again, not just with cattle and crops but with the possibility of redemption. He thought of Jacob, out there somewhere, finding his way, and of Lila, whose quiet strength had become a part of his world. The wind carried a new kind of promise, one of second chances and the courage to act, even when the path was uncertain. This story, raw and real, is for anyone who's ever lost someone, who's ever carried the weight of regret, who's ever dared to hope against all odds. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe in the power of love and redemption, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Gentle Hearts to keep these stories alive. And before you go, leave a comment below, tell us what this story meant to you, or share your own story of second chances. Your words matter, and we'd love to hear them.